Can a story of Goku and Uub work? Well, to answer your thoughts, alrighty guys, it is Quaman here today, also known as Detective Q, and months ago Toyotaro discussed Dragon Ball Super and said that the ending of Super has to line up with the ending of Z. So with that said, we know Universe 7 survives, Goku takes Uub to train, and much more. But today I'm gonna say why Goku and Uub should have their own arc in Dragon Ball Super. So let's get started. So, the first benefit we have to talk about is the fact that it can continue the Dragon Ball story, and this seems very simple and easy to understand, but if you really think about it, Dragon Ball is one of those shows that no matter what it is, people will watch it. You can give us a good story, you can give us a bad story, you can give us fan service, you can give us fan fiction, you can give us something based off of a video game, you can watch a Dragon Ball YouTuber. People will always want to watch Dragon Ball, which means that there will always be a demand for it, and Toei can make money off of it too with all of the new merchandise of new characters. And to move on to my next point, the next thing we should talk about is dealing with Uub's character. Now, one problem that I had with the original ending of Dragon Ball Z was how Uub was this random kid that came out of nowhere and Goku decided to himself, okay, I'm gonna go train this guy so that he can be really strong and defend the Earth one day. But the weird thing about this is that Uub's character never really got any development, even if you consider Dragon Ball GT a part of Uub's story, because when you look at GT, he had that one moment where he fused with Majin Buu to become Uub, and that's pretty much it. Having a storyline that's focused around Goku and Uub will allow Uub to have much more development that the character needed for us as fans to be much more interested in his character instead of some random kid that just happens to be the reincarnation of Majin Buu. So I think seeing the development of Uub would be a much more interesting and new take on things, as we're seeing Goku as the teacher now. And when we move on from Uub's character, we should also discuss the level of uncertainty that would take place. Now, one big problem that Dragon Ball Super has had is dealing with tension, and the reason why I say tension is a big problem is because Super takes place in between the gap from the ending of the Buu saga until the ending of Z. So because of this, we kind of already know how everything is gonna end up. So no matter how much tension you show in the future Trunks arc, no matter how much tension you try to build up in the Tournament of Power, the Universe 6 tournament, the Beerus and the Resurrection of F stories, it doesn't matter because we all know that everybody will be fine in the end. However, if you make this Uub story go into a timeline after the ending of Dragon Ball Z, what this now does is it puts us in an amount of uncertainty where we don't know how the story is going to go into a direction. And when you want to talk about Dragon Ball GT and say that Dragon Ball GT is a continuation, Super has clearly indicated new elements to the story that have completely written out Dragon Ball GT. So you could just look at Dragon Ball GT as an alternate scenario, look at this scenario as an original story, and now the future is uncertain with new villains and new characters coming into the fray that we have no idea is going to happen in the show. And when we talk about one of the biggest benefits to all of this, guys, it would be a greater cast. Now, as I've said before, this story would be focused more so on Goku and Uub, right? But at the same time, there are a lot of other characters that can also be involved. When you think about it, we finally would get the Goten and Trunks that we wanted, with them actually aging instead of Super making them perpetually kids throughout the series. When you also factor in that both Bulla and Pan are also now going to be more involved in the series because they're not babies anymore and they're more so going to be toddlers and young children. And when you also factor in that unlike the ending of Dragon Ball Z and even in GT, Beerus and Whis can now be involved in the storyline, so you're going to be seeing more character involvement in all of this, and it expands the cast. So even if you focus the story on Goku and Uub, you can always make those characters that are on the side much more involved in the story because you have so many characters in the fray now. And another thing to add to this, guys, would be the Pilaf gang. Now, in Dragon Ball GT, the Pilaf gang was old, and they wanted to use the Dragon Balls, as we saw in the beginning of the series. However, if you look at Dragon Ball Super's version of the Pilaf gang is the polar opposite, as they're all very young. So with that said, seeing the Pilaf gang coming back and interacting with so many characters can make the show filled with potential and movement to have so many moving pieces throughout the show. And this brings me into my next point. With a greater cast, we have the potential to be less focused on Goku. Now, as I've said, Goku can be the primary focus of training Uub as another character in the series, but at the same time, when you have such a greater cast, you don't have to let Goku do everything. Let's say Goku takes Uub to go train with Beerus and Whis, or he takes them into a faraway place where he doesn't want any disturbances from the members of planet Earth. What this now does is that the show creates an excuse to take Goku away from everybody, and now all of the other characters can potentially fend off against villains, or you can see some slice of life episodes on how their life expands without the usage of Goku. So I think for side stories and for potential villains, that would be a great idea to see the other characters being involved, especially now that they would be older. But as we have to be unbiased in all these episodes, let's talk about some of the cons that would be associated to creating a Goku Uub story. And one of the first things would be marketing, as Masako X always says. When you think about it, merchandise is a massive part of these anime franchises, and when you factor in that Uub is a character that would kind of be restricting the potential merchandise in the series, that can somewhat hurt things, because if you have characters like Goku and Vegeta getting all of these new forms and new villains that can transform, that can somewhat take away from the marketing direction of the series, unless you can create new villains that can transform. But this takes me into my next con. So I thought about this really hard, guys, and as I've said before, where I thought the Tournament of Power is Dragon Ball Super's limit, it's going to be very hard to create new original villains at this point, because when you really think about it, if there is an entire Angel War in Dragon Ball Super, you can't potentially use them as villains. And as I've said before, I'm assuming we're going to keep Beerus and Whis into the storyline, but if Whis is going to be a part of this Angel War, that eliminates him too potentially from all of this. And who knows what could possibly happen to Beerus after this Tournament of Power. So if you really think about it, there could be a lack of characters from a villain perspective that can also challenge the show. Without the Angels, who else can really be a threat? We've already tried having Goku as a villain, and we had Goku Black during the Future Trunks arc. We've had Frieza during Resurrection of F. We had Beerus as a villain during the God of Destruction storyline. We had a Universe 6 tournament with Hit. So really, who can now come into the show that can now cause a problem that would actually threaten the characters that Goku and Vegeta can't now stop? You see where I'm going with this? The villain potential would be very limited if we were to do a storyline focused around Goku and Uub, and to tell you the truth, villains drive the Dragon Ball story. And last but not least, guys, the number one problem of this is how long can a Goku Uub story actually last? I mean, I think it's a great idea on paper when you think about what it can do for advancing Dragon Ball Super and showing us more Dragon Ball. But at the same time, it's kind of limited in having a long running time, because if you really think about the show, at some point people might just get bored watching Goku training Uub or watching villains that really pose no threat to Goku and friends, and you have to go in a completely original and new direction if you're going to create villains after all of this. But like I said, if you were ever going in that direction, marketing always creates new villains for you. But as I've said, storylines can definitely be very hard to work in the future if we were to go with a Goku and Uub star cast. So ultimately, guys, after analyzing everything today, I think we can safely say that from a marketing point of view, this wouldn't work, but from a storytelling point of view, this would be an awesome idea, especially for Dragon Ball fans of all kinds who want to see a lot of character development. But when you think about it, Toei wouldn't be motivated to make a storyline around Goku and Uub because it simply wouldn't sell enough merchandise. And when I was mentioning things like a lot of the other cast members that can also now be involved, let's be honest here. Dragon Ball has a massive cast, but it doesn't really use it because the minor characters don't sell enough merchandise, and it also wouldn't get enough interest on television to drive the market. So I think it would be a great idea, and I would look forward to seeing something like this, but I think from a business point of view, Toei would never be motivated to do something like this, and I think it would be very difficult to come up with storylines that could really push the story. So ultimately, guys, that's been my piece for today. I think this would be a great idea, but I'm also aware of what could not work for it. And let me know what all of your thoughts are in the comment section below. So with everything else said, please remember to rate, comment, and subscribe. And remember, as I always say, to have a great day, guys.